How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good. Yeah. Can
Good.
you hear me all
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. How about you through
right?
me?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Everything.
Excellent.
It's working. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, the perils of technology. They're asking you to update something every 4 weeks or something like that. It's a bit of a
I
challenge to keep
it
up.
just kept saying that the update failed. So
Hmm.
probably I'll try again sometime.
Okay. All right. You know what? A beverage sounds like a wonderful idea. It's the one thing I missed out on. Hang on one second. Seeing as that yeah, it's 10 p.m. for you out there right now, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Over here it's 2 p.m. So while it's brewski time for you, it's a coffee for me.
No, it's this is lemon water.
Oh, excellent. That sounds even better, honestly. I
Yeah,
haven't had good
yeah.
lemon water in quite some time.
Oh,
Well, let's get started. First of all, let me say thank you for being here. This is an incredible honor to be speaking with you right now about one of the most important records on my influential template. And this is really exciting for me right now. So I will try my hardest to maintain my composure through the next little bit here because this is a dream come true. Welcome, Mark, to Scrapyard Radio.
welcome. You are welcome.
Thank you. Now, before we get into this record, I'd like to ask about your experience with Download, like how you came to join the project, what was going through your mind at the time of composing and recording this masterpiece, and how its lasting effect resonates with you today. Because it is often said that history is made by those who aren't aware of it happening, but just by those going ahead and doing it. And does that not feel like an apt description of the experience? What was it like for you to be
Uh,
involved? For those who aren't familiar.
um, well, I'll try and answer all of your questions. It'll probably take
Mhm.
me a while. Um, Basically, when I moved to Vancouver, I reached out to a DJ from um, the UBC radio um, show, a UBC radio show, who sort of,
CITR. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, Sergio, who was playing kind of music that I thought they might be interested in if I sent them some. So I did. I sent them some music. I said, I used to be in this band called Soviet France. And she said, um, lady called June Scudler, she said, you need to, I'm going to hook you up with Kevin from Skinny Puppy because he's apparently just put a show on by by Soviet France. I mean, I'd left the band several years before that, but I we connected and we ended up doing recording together at my apartment, which was tiny, and I had a 4-track recorder and uh, hardly any gear at all. I mean, you know, I think I had one microphone, a borrowed keyboard, um, and an effects unit that I loaned from Long and McQuaid, the shop in Vancouver. And so Kevin and I just started to make music together. And then he'd pop off to do what he was doing with Skinny Puppy, and he'd come back, and we'd always get together, and we were getting on very well. And after he returned to Vancouver, Dwayne and he set up a studio called Subconscious downtown in Vancouver. And Dwayne had become friends with a guy called Phil Weston, who at that time was a part owner of a record shop, which was directly opposite where the
Odyssey
studio was.
Import on
That's
Seymour
right, yeah.
Street. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I used
we
to
we
shop there
used
all the time.
yeah. So we used to so Kevin said, you know what, we should all get together and make music. So we did. And made quite a lot of music. And then they had the idea about forming a new band because I think it's fair to say that Skinny Puppy was not functional at that point in time. And so yeah, we just set about recording a record, which was all done through long improvisations in the studio. And that's how it happened, really. We just became friends. Um, I mean, I wasn't that aware of Kevin's music as Skinny Puppy. I didn't come into it as a, uh, you know, I knew that they were an influential Canadian band, um, but the fact that we started to make music together was because we really enjoyed being with each other, and we developed a close friendship, and that
Mhm.
just kind of spread with um, Dwayne and Phil, and by the time Furnace came out, we were just kind of like cruising, really. I mean, it was a lot of work. I have to say, Furnace mainly for Kevin. Um, and then the kind of, we had plans to play live and start another record, and then the sort of like, you know, the world fell apart really, which is that Dwayne died very suddenly, unexpectedly,
Mhm.
and Phil left for India quite suddenly, and, you know, um, not terribly unexpectedly because he always wanted to travel. And at that point in time, it was just Kevin and I. And so he said, "Well, actually, I think the first thing we did was we went and signed a record contract with Network, um, and which enabled us, to um, record the Eyes of Stanley Payne, which was really majority of which was just Kevin and I, and um, with the as engineering and production assistance of Ken Marshall." Um, and you asked loads of questions to begin with, and I think I've only really answered one. I mean, I think you also talked about, this whole thing, which is very fascinating because it's, how many years ago is it now? It's nearly 30 years, isn't it?
Almost
28.
30 years, 27
Yeah.
years since the record came out.
Yeah. So obviously, I, the way that I look at records and releasing records is
Mhm.
that you just join in a whole host of other people that release records. I have no sense of the fact that what we were doing was creating some kind of historic document, because the whole sort of the way that I work in my own mind is that I'm really only super interested in what I'm actually doing right now, like right now at this moment, and that
Mhm.
everything is consigned to oh yeah, I did that. And you know I think the Eyes of Stanley Penny is slightly different because of the fact that we toured it, and we were on a record label at that time that supported us and gave us tour support. Actually, two record labels it was, because it was the European label as well. So they actually put up money for us to tour, and I think that sort of changes the memory, because then the memory becomes infused with I played a show in Aarhus in Denmark, or I you know you know we played in Numbers in Houston or wherever, and you just remember certain sort of like well, I think I remember most of them really, but you remember it as a sort of time in history because of all of the experiences that you had and all of the people that you knew. But as for it becoming an important record, I mean, I don't know if it is. All I know is that it is something that I felt proud of and feel proud of. Um, and the fact that people like it is, it's still it's really nice. It's really nice to know that. But I have no sense of it as being an important historical document. Just that it was an important historical time of my life, and it was about Vancouver. It was about the circumstances we were in, and it was about the people that were around at the time.
Mhm.
Um, and those are the memories that I have, of the recording process, and of the uh, satisfaction, really, of creating something that I thought, that I do feel proud of. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Now, it is absolutely amazing because, like I said, 30 years on, almost 30 years on, it still sounds very fresh compared to the music that's out even today. It does, it just feels like a breath of fresh air, you know. Still after all this time, all of a lot of it seems, it feels, like an improvisational, almost fever dream. And as you were saying, it had a lot to do with, your experiences, you know, working with the band in its at the time that they were, going through, in Vancouver. Now, while you were wearing many hats on this recording, I understand that you were a connoisseur of toy instruments and things. Could you share with us a few ideas or little tricks or toys that you might have used on that recording,
Um,
if you could recall?
yeah, I mean, the idea of using toys was not a new one. It's not as though I
Hmm.
discovered anything. Um, but of course, I come into this as somebody who is not a musician, who can only play the drums, really. That's the only instrument I would say that I can actually play properly. Um, and having access to something like, a toy and an effects unit gives you the opportunity to, create music with very few barriers put in front of yourself. I mean, people will often, say, "Hey, man, I've just bought a new synth," and I'm just like, "Oh, right, okay. Well, I've never owned a synthesizer, and I wouldn't really know I mean, I wouldn't know how to use one, So it's like, um, because they look incredibly complicated things,
Hmm.
and the people who can use them, hats off to them, But me, I the reason I focused on my voice and on in playing children's toys is because I've got unfettered access to both of them.
Hmm.
I can utilize my voice because it's it's me.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I think we really pushed the envelope on Stanley Payne with the voice. Um, and I can utilize children's toys because hey, you don't need any skill to use them. You just
It's
I think
true.
the skill comes from something completely different, which is the ability to work with other people and the capacity to improvise, which is all based on the idea of listening to people and of respecting what other people contribute. Um,
Hmm.
and I think not only during the course of being in download had I put in the miles to enable myself to develop that skill, um, but the the sort of like the way that download evolved was that we emerged into what we were doing because we became accomplished improvisers. Do you know what I mean? So the
Hmm.
whole act of improvisation is laying yourself bare because there's no structure, there's no plan. You allow what what is going on within the room to kind of guide you. So I think we put in the miles, we developed the capacity to work together through improvisation, and therefore what I was doing, which was largely all improvised, um, you know, added to that kind of mix. I mean, I can recall at the time, even myself, we were all quite excited about the kind of new batch of electronic musicians in the kind of techno sphere. Um,
Hmm.
but the thing that struck me about a lot of that kind of music was, although the rhythms were interesting and I liked the repetition and I liked the minimalism of it all, I got kind of um, tired of the fact that there wasn't really a lot of interesting stuff going on over the top. Um,
Hmm.
if it had a strong melody, that's fine. But I think what we did within Download is that we used some of the kind of layers that I created as being part of the kind of you know, the wash, but also the kind of top of the music on occasions. And I think that created a kind of sense of, oddness that was most obvious with Furnace, because I think it's an odd record.
Hmm.
Um, it's one of those records that I still love listening to because it sounds. I don't think it's dated at all. Furnace. I think the Eyes of Standing Pain may have dated a little bit because of some of the rhythms that they use, because the sound of its time. But um, you know, we had that capacity really to kind of like make best use of each other's skills. And if I had a skill at the time, I think it was in that. It was in creating a texture, in
Hmm.
creating a kind of occasionally providing a structure, but usually being the guy that did the stuff on top of the music that was made by the others. Um, I mean, I had I had some favorite toys at the time, most of which I no longer have. Um, the famous one was a Godzilla walking toy that
Nice.
made a beautiful kind of like sound as it walked. And I bought it from Radio Shack for like £5, $5 or something, $10 or something.
Right.
But it was my favorite one because you put a microphone right next to it and you get this like it was absolutely great.
That's amazing.
And I used that all of the time, and then it was stolen
Oh,
along with a bunch of other toys from a concert that we did in Atlanta with Download. And then
bummer.
about 2 years later, I was at Invisible Records in Chicago,
Hmm.
and the label manager came in and said, "Matt, you have no idea what we've just received." And I opened this box, and it was a box full of my toys with a note in
No
it.
way.
And the note said, "We're really sorry. We understand we stole these from you at a concert in Atlanta. It was good natured because we had a child at the time and we knew the child would love playing with the toys. And we've returned them all except Godzilla because our child is now so attached to Godzilla." And I thought that was incredible. A, the honesty, but B, the, the child is welcome to the toy. It's like I
Wow.
did at one point. I did at one point in time try to buy the same toy again. A few
Hmm.
years ago, I thought, you can buy anything nowadays on eBay, can't you? So
Yeah, you
I
can.
did search, and I only found a broken one, which I wasn't
Oh,
going to
no,
buy.
of course.
But
No.
yeah, I might do it again. I might have another go because I was really attached to that. And I can recall I had a really nice toy piano as well. It was tiny. Um, I mean, most of these things fall apart after a while. You can't, um,
Oh, of
especially
course.
considering we were touring with all these things. So I'd have this table full of toys and stuff, which was a bit of an attraction if you were of the light fingered persuasion.
Right.
Um, but I sort of I regard almost everything that I touch as a toy, and the reason for that is that I never learn how to use anything because
Well, doesn't
I
that
just
feel?
it feels liberating, to be honest. Yeah, but I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you know, colleagues that I've worked with, musicians, devour manuals of things. They'll read the manual from front to back, and it's like, oh, and it's like, oh. And to me, it's just foreign language. I just
Hmm.
don't understand it, and I find it tedious. And so I buy, pieces of equipment, and I just plug it in, and I'm probably getting a fraction out of them really, but that fraction I'd probably make the most of. So
It's
toys.
it it does remind me of a card by Brian Eno's Oblique Strategies set, where he says, use inexperienced people.
Yeah,
Um,
well, download used
or
me.
right.
I was the
Or
inexperienced person.
or another, or a quote by Kurt Cobain, who once said, I know I may not be able to play like Segovia, but Segovia may never be able to play like me. And
That's
now,
true.
do you feel that your lack of experience in said instrumentation and not being like, as you were saying, reading the manuals as it were, like many of the other skilled musicians out there, do you feel that you, in a sense, have a certain creative edge that trained musicians might not have, based on the fact that you're able to
Well,
explore different avenues that they otherwise wouldn't see, based on the barriers that were come across by,
I
like, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you know?
yeah,
Doesn't
I
that
would never.
feel?
Yeah, I would never claim that for myself,
Mm,
but I do have a belief, and the belief is that I think in order to really tap into the kind of heart of one's creativity, one has got to embrace the possibility of failure, um, and of the divine accident. And I think if you're governed by technique, then it's highly unlikely that you're going to get into the zone where you are going to reap the benefits of managing the accident. And
mhm,
it's that moment where you think, "Oh shit, this is not gonna work," and it's gonna, that to me is is the place of real magic. That's where things
mhm.
really happen. And if you're governed by technique, I fail to see how that's gonna how you know how that's gonna manifest. I mean, I was thinking there about Kurt Cobain. I mean, to me, when I think about what he did, it's that kind of like will from within. That kind of hopelessness, that kind of violent destructiveness that comes across in his music as well. It
Mhm,
comes across in his
mhm,
music, and I don't think that happened because he taught himself how to be like that. I think it happened because he allowed himself to be like that.
it's a little more
Um,
primal, you think, then?
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think Picasso, who was a great technician, I mean, he was
Mhm,
painting he was painting like El Greco or something when he was 12, something ridiculous. But I
mhm,
mean, he said, "I've spent the whole of my life trying to paint as I did when I was a child." And I think he allowed himself to try to do that. Do you know what I mean? It's a
mhm.
conscious decision. You say, "This is what I'm going to do." Um, and I think it's inherently risky, but I think there's a lot of benefit to be potentially reaped from going into that zone where you just allow yourself to be. Um, so yeah, I think technique. I'm not saying I would claim that I've mastered this or that I'm an expert or anything, but I do think that technique can hamper creativity, and
Mhm.
that some of the musicians that I really respect have said they've spent years trying to unlearn what they've learned,
Yeah,
which I
no,
think is, you know,
I can relate. I
yeah,
can relate, being a musician myself. We're at the
yeah,
process of unlearning that we've all learned,
yeah,
all that we have learned, and trying to approach things in a different light to create something a little more
yeah,
exciting, that to
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of top what we've our last efforts, so to speak.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, and experimentation has always been like a huge part of that.
yeah,
And yeah, I can totally agree with you on that
yeah.
entirely. Um, Now, you've once said, I was checking out an interview with I Die You Die, a couple of friends of
Oh yeah.
mine from Vancouver, and you've mentioned that, contrary to critical opinion, the Eyes of Stanley Payne is not a concept album. Now, could you care to elaborate on that? Like, because lyrically and thematically, it all seems to be running around a certain theme, and obviously the title in itself lends the idea that you're telling a story, that it is a bit of an allegory of something. Now, you've mentioned earlier tonight that it was a collection of thoughts and ideas from your experiences in Vancouver. But could you maybe elaborate a little more on on the conceptualness of it all, if there is any?
Um, there isn't any concept, and
Hmm.
I've always steered away from concept really.
Hmm.
And there's no thematic cohesion. Um, you know, I don't know how they can be really. So, for example, Glassblower
Hmm.
was the very last song we worked on before the record was finished,
Hmm.
and I did the vocals for that on one evening, actually in Brian Adams's home studio in West Vancouver. Was it West Vancouver?
I believe it's
Um,
downtown, right downtown, the warehouse.
no,
Was it his
he
personal studio at home?
this is his home. It was his. We actually
Hmm.
recorded it in his home. He had a
Okay.
studio in his home, and it was West Vancouver. And so um, the music was assembled. I think Kevin had done some music, and then Kevin went on holiday to Jamaica, and I was there with Anthony Valsic and another engineer, and they said, "Look, we've got this track assembled. Will you come do some vocals?" So they took me over to West Van,
Hmm.
and I wrote the vocals based on an article that was in the Vancouver Province. There was a copy of the Vancouver Province in the studio, and there was an article about Palestine, and I literally took some of the words from it and wrote the words for Glassblower. So how could it be a concept album if that's how we were writing songs? Do you get my point?
Yeah,
It's not a
I can.
concept album at all. It's
Mhm.
not. I mean, Sidewinder is a critique of the America that I don't like. You know, um, Glassblower is a critique of the Israeli treatment of Palestinian people. Um, uh, One of the I can't remember which song now. I think it might be called Sunny Sea, where I do this kind of monologue. Is a monologue of words that I actually found. I found them in a cafe that somebody'd written them. You know,
That's
it's not
brilliant, by the way.
I mean, I think thanks. I mean, I added some words to it,
Hmm.
like 13 peaks and 13 gods,
Hmm.
and I don't, whatever.
Yeah.
But at the time I was reading a lot of Baudelaire, and I think that sort of came through. Um,
Hence the Baudelaire quote in the liner notes.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, I forgot
Yeah.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But um, I think Stanley Payne was a studio album that was largely composed and written in the studio,
Hmm.
whereas Furnace was a collection of improvisations that were cohesively put together and through rigorous editing by Kevin.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that if anything, Furnace is the Vancouver album because you've got this kind of. Um, I've just written a book actually. I wrote about this in the book, um, and I called Vancouver. It might sound a bit unkind, this, but I called it a pretty shitty city. And
Coming
I
from
think I called it
Vancouver, I can agree with you on that one.
a pretty shitty city. That's not really a city; it's a big town.
Yeah.
And but the reason I think the reason I think that um, Furnace is a Vancouver album is if you look at the sleeve, it has that sort of holographic thing of going from beauty to industry, like beauty to ugliness.
Hmm.
And I think um, we were sort of intoxicated with that, partly because of where we were recording. It was high up in an office block, a really sort of like benign, office block.
Hmm.
There weren't any other recording studios in there. There were all sort of business people that were in it.
It
They'd
was a
all,
commercial building, if I remember
yeah,
correctly. Yeah.
they'd all leave at 5 o'clock,
Hmm.
and then, well, we'd start before then. But I mean, and then you'd hear the strange music coming in and around the building. But when you looked out the windows of Subconscious, you could see, Grouse Mountain, Cyprus, and then you could see the waterway, you could see the little aeroplanes landing,
Hmm.
and it's kind of beautiful. And but you're in a city. Um, I mean, I think the thing about Vancouver is that when I moved there, you spend the first 6 months looking up at the mountains and saying, "My God, this is gorgeous." And then you literally walk from one. Well, you know this. You literally walk from one block to another, and you were in one of the most desperately sad places in the world. It's not a third world country, but it's a country that treats its people who live in poverty despicably poorly.
Yes, I
You've got
agree
you've got
entirely.
this incredible dynamic between the rich, who are richer than you can believe in Vancouver. They're sitting on pockets of land that are nothing, in houses that are nothing, and yet they're millionaires. And you've
Yeah.
got the people who live in the downtown east side who are just live in abject poverty and have got nothing, and are basically on a terrible sort of spiral of self-destruction.
Hmm.
And living in that kind of environment for me was unbearable, really, I have to say, because you know because there was such a paucity of help for the people.
Yeah.
And I was very aware and very sort of mindful of the fact that actually the city existed because of this. You've got this terrible poverty and this obscene wealth, and yet nobody's really doing anything about it. So that sort of dynamic, I think, was all the way through Furnace. That sort of
Hmm.
beauty and ugliness, really.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know about Stanley Payne. Um, I mean, I can tell you the story about how we ended up with the title, which was, again,
Sure.
it was
Yeah.
sort of fairly sort of like advanced, and we were sort of thinking, what are we going to call this record? And Ken Marshall was absolutely brilliant to work with, lovely guy, really hardworking,
Hmm.
fun, just very sort of like um, had a very strong sort of work ethic, as did Kevin as well, as does Kevin, very, very
Hmm.
strong work ethic. I mean, for Kevin, this was basically a full-time job. He'd start at 12 in the morning and
Hmm.
finish at sort of, well, 12 at night. But with Ken had recorded some adverts from the radio or TV, and at the time there was an actress called, I'm going to say, oh, what's she called? Candice, was it? She's a famous actress. Anyway, it'll come to me.
Hmm.
Candice, or something like that. And it was for an advert for a telephone company called Sprint Canada.
Okay.
And so she did. Was it Candice Newman? That name is sticking in my mind. I don't know.
Mm.
She was a famous actress at the time, and she did this series of ads. It wasn't just one. And I think the quote, the buzz, the catchphrase was, "Just what will Sprint Canada do for you?" or something like that. And so Ken had that recorded, and he slowed it down, and it was going. And the first word is sleeping. And we said, "What the hell was that?" So we were Kevin and I were sort of like, "The eyes of Stanley Payne." And it was like, I think they say, I think you say, I think it sounds like "The Eyes of Stanley Payne," and we go, "That's what we're going to call the record."
That's
And
amazing.
it's
I
just,
believe that sample is at the end of the record, if I remember correctly.
yeah. There's a song, isn't there? We actually call. I think I don't
The
know what
Eyes
the
of
song is
Stanley
called.
Payne. It was the title
Yeah, yeah,
track.
yeah.
Yeah. At the very end of
Just,
the record, and you hear
just
that
what
stretched
can
out voice.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
her, and
Yeah.
that's the advert, and it's just, what can Sprint Canada do for you? And yeah, it was, and that was all. It was just Ken, um, and I actually played guitar on that track as well, which is very strange because I really can't play the guitar, but through a very strange effect. But
Hmm.
so there was no conceptualness about it. I don't really think there's a link between the lyrical content. I mean,
Hmm.
they added some stuff that Genesis did, but it was just from recordings that they'd done in Malibu, um,
Hmm.
when they did a long improvisation with Genesis Peorage, and we
Right.
were literally just abstractly picking up words from what he'd said. Hey, you lot up there, it was like, because he was like pointing at, apparently he was pointing at other people watching. Hey, you lot up there. and it ended up on a download song, you know.
So Genesis
Um,
was a collection of recordings from the Puppy Gristle
that's
sessions then, right?
yes,
He didn't
absolutely, yeah.
fly in, or it wasn't like
Oh God,
a
no,
mail
no,
back
no,
and forth thing. He wasn't okay.
no.
All right.
We did speak to him on the phone a few times, but no.
Mhm,
At one point, he sent a tape as well.
mhm.
I'm not sure whoever used that, and I think the reason that we didn't use it is because he'd already released it. There was another album that he'd released that had it on, and we were like,
Oh.
I didn't know that. Kevin was listening. I think Kevin was listening and said, "You know, I've heard this before." I'm like, "Oh shit."
Uh-oh.
But I mean, his bits added certain quality to the whole thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but I mean, the Eyes of Stanley Payne is when I started my career. He says mockingly as a vocalist because most of the vocals on there are me, and some of the words were written on the fly. I mean, one of them was actually from a song that I wrote the words for, um, from a band in my hometown that I was in like 1986. So
Hmm.
I just recycled the words. We never recorded it in that band, but I just recycled the words. That's um, we did a song. There was this. Uh, the studio seemed to attract a lot of flies, and they were all over the place, and they were like buzzing in your ear and that. And then they'd die on the windowsills. So we would jokingly refer to them as kill flies. So we recorded a song called Kill Fly. It was playful, it was playful.
Yeah.
It's a playful element. I mean, the other dynamic that was definitely around for Kevin and I is that we started to record that not long after Dwayne died. So it was a sad time as well. There was a lot of, I think that kind of powerful emotion most likely came through in the music as well. Which probably inevitable, isn't it? Really, um,
Definitely. Yeah.
we just I think what musicians do you know is you just throw yourself back into the work, and the work takes you in a certain direction. And I think there is a cohesiveness to the Eyes of Stanley Payne.
Hmm.
I don't think that's because of uh, a conceptual basis or thematic cohesion between the songs. I think the connectedness is in some of the things that I've talked about, really, which is,
Hmm.
this is how it was. I mean, I think right at the end, I can remember right towards the end. I mean, literally, um, uh, right when we were sort of finishing off the couple. I've already said I think the last thing we did was
Hmm.
Glassblower. I
Yes.
think towards the end was Sidewinder was one of the latter ones as well.
Hmm.
And I can remember doing the recording for that, and then the legendary Pink Dots came to town, and it must have been about the time because they stayed for well over a month, I think, to record um, the Tiergarten album, which I've forgotten the
Hmm.
name of now. Um, we were all involved in the recording of that. It was a fantastic time, really, really good fun. Um, and I used to work about oh, 50 yards away from where Kevin lived. Um,
Hmm.
on Robson Street in Vancouver. And I can remember coming out at lunchtime, going out to buy some food, and Kevin was coming out of his apartment, and Edward was there, and they were on the opposite side of the road. And Kevin started to like shout over the road to me, "Vile American!" He's going up and down the road, Robson Street, going, "Vile American!" It was a lot of fun. I think
Absolutely.
there was always that sense of us having um, an enjoyable time whilst we did it. I mean, it was wildly inventive. I think that
Mhm.
comes out in the music. It is very. Uh, it's it's. I think it is wildly inventive. I don't know if that's what. I don't know if that's why it kind of sounds like it's hasn't dated that much. I mean, I think in you know in terms of how music dates, it's often in the production techniques that you use, or
Hmm.
the kind of rhythms that you use.
Right.
So a lot of that 80s really high compressed gated drumming, like Phil Collins style, or
Hmm.
Mick Karn bass lines,
Right.
it sounds incredibly 80s like, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think there's a little bit of that on Stanley Payne because of the duh, 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 kind of you know beat that was on a couple of tracks. But I mean, that's still as hard as nails. It's still,
It
I
is, it
mean,
is, and you know what? To be honest, the four on
yeah,
the floor thing is still very prominent today in
yeah, it
EDM
is.
acts and advanced electronic acts. You know, Amon
Yeah,
Tobin, Apex Twin, the list goes on and on. Um, that in its sense, it still sounds fresh. I'm guessing based on the just the improvisation because that doesn't really know a date and time. You know what I mean?
I
So,
think that's right. I mean, also,
mhm.
I think um, some of the sort of sounds in it are kind of uh, strange. I mean, um, we're talking Sidewinder here as well. I mean,
Mhm.
IM5 is another one of my favorite tracks.
Absolutely.
And I can remember when we did that. I improvised the vocals, so I think the vocals for IM5 were probably done in one take.
Wow.
And
Nice.
Anthony Valsic was engineering it, and he was really tickled by what I was saying because he
Hmm.
thought I was saying I am five, like I am five, like 5 years old.
Hmm.
I mean, I wasn't. I mean, I don't know what I was saying. I mean, I actually transcribed the lyrics and I wrote them down as a sign. A sign. He thought I was saying I am five, and that's why the track was called I Am Five.
Hmm.
Glassblower, for all I've said that Glassblower was influenced by me reading an article about the treatment of Palestinians,
Hmm.
um, the reason it was called Glassblower is that Anthony had met a lady who was a glassblower. That's why we called the track.
And that's it.
It was like, that's right, we'll call it after Anthony's lady friend, who is a glassblower, like who makes glass. So
Amazing.
I think the playfulness,
Hmm.
comes through really.
Hmm.
Um, that sort of sense of, we can do this, and it doesn't really matter if, it's. I think you have to sort of block out the fact that um, it might, when you're doing vocals like a sign, whatever,
Hmm.
you have to blank out the thing in your mind that says I'm an idiot. I must sound like a complete idiot. You just block it out and say, you know what? So what if I'm an idiot? So what? I'm making a record.
There you go. Right.
um,
That's that,
yeah,
and that's the beauty of it, to be able to let go of any inhibitions and preconceived
yeah.
notions that, or maybe I shouldn't do this, that kind of thing. It removes that. Removing that from your mind in the recording process allows you to take off in any
The,
different level. Sky's the limit. You know what I mean?
yeah. The other
Yeah.
thing that I think is really important about this record
Mhm.
is Kevin's input, and
Mhm.
because he took two different roles really. With Furnace, he was, we probably had, I don't, probably had about 30 or 40 hours of recorded material that he edited from. Because when we got together and we improvised, it was up for 4 or 5 hours at a time.
Mhm.
Um, and to be honest, most of it sounded good. So, but his skill in Furnace was in, getting into it and editing and, um, but on Stanley Payne, he was definitely the producer. He had a different role really. I mean, Ken was the engineer, Kevin was the producer, and I
Mhm.
think that even to the point where he would coach me when I was doing vocals, um, and we were. I was talking to him about this recently. And we were laughing our heads off because it was like, um, I'd do the first take, and I go, "Oh, that was really good. That was really good, wasn't it?" because I'm a great believer in first takes, and he would say, "Yeah, that was really good, Matt. Let's do it again." I'm like, "Okay, all right." So you do it again, and it's like, "That was really good, that Kevin, wasn't it?" "Yeah, Matt, that was really good. But I tell you what, let's just do it again." And he'd do like, 4, 5, 6 times. Matt, I think we can do better here. So I tell you what, let's just do it again. I'm like, okay, and sometimes it'd be like 15 takes or something. And then he go, "You know what? I think we'll use the first one." But I think he was absolutely spot on, bang on, right.
Mhm.
When you're doing something like that, you don't just take whatever you do. What you do is you give yourself a range of options, and you go, "This is the one that fits the best."
Yeah.
Um, and he was also a master of the effects unit as well. He had this super expensive Eventide vocal processor. It was just incredible, and it was just an
Mhm.
incredible thing. I couldn't. I mean, it's not as though I could never bring myself to buy something that was that expensive. You know, even if I did have the money, I'd be like going, "I could buy a bike for this." So I could probably buy a small house. Um, but it was incredible, and he had the mastery over it. So
Mhm.
it was great. I mean, it was fantastic. He was brilliant. Um, and I think it sounds like a good album. It still sounds like it was well recorded.
Absolutely. Now it has been recently remastered on Artifact Records. Both of them, Sidewinder and Stanley Payne. What are your thoughts about remasters in general? Just out of curiosity, like the
Oh,
whole loudness war
uh,
thing, the dynamics versus raising things to the hilt, in order to I don't know, to meet some sort of silently spoken, agreed upon industry standard that no one's really kind of originally thought of to begin with, and then
well,
all of a sudden everything gets hotter and hotter and hotter, especially
hmm.
in the digital age. Like what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think I might know the person who mastered them. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know what source he had to master it from. I just
Mhm.
don't know.
Mhm. Mhm.
But what I do know is because the artifact things came out of vinyl, and they were coloured vinyls, weren't they? Like
Yeah,
splatters. I
there's
mean,
some colored vinyls. There's colored vinyls. There's also traditional black vinyl, and then there was a
yeah,
picture vinyl as well. Yeah.
yeah, I've got them all. I mean, they very
Mhm.
kindly gave me copies of them,
Mhm.
and they look beautiful.
Right.
Um, but I'm not sure that it's added anything to the sound quality. Um, in fact, I think as soon as I could be wrong because I'm not an audiophile, but as soon
Mhm.
as you start to mess with groovy coloured vinyls and splatter and all that, I don't think it can enhance the sound quality of the vinyl. Um, so, and I must confess, when I first heard them, I was disappointed because I was almost expecting them to be remastered, but it just
Mhm.
sounded to me like it was the original album just bunged on record, if you know what I mean. So
Right. Right.
uh, I, I don't know. I mean, I think in order to master them, you know, I don't know. I don't know how it was done. I think I do know the person that did it. I think he's a friend of mine from Coventry.
Mhm.
Um,
Hmm.
and he's very good at what he does, but depends
Mhm.
what source he's been given.
Right. Right.
Um, so I that CD sounds fine to me. So,
Right.
the
So
CDs.
perhaps it was a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and they just dug up the original masters, and
I
perhaps
think it's
they felt that it
nice.
sounded okay,
Yeah, I
because
mean, I think it's
it's still a
nice
great
to.
sounding album.
I think it's nice to have them on vinyl,
Hmm.
and they do look really special.
Hmm.
Beautiful
Yes, they do.
objects.
Yeah.
Um, but I've only played them all once.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I mean, I don't. Oh, I think I'll listen to the Eyes of Stanley Payne today. I don't listen to any. I don't really listen to anything that I've done. I mean, I did listen to Glassblower recently
Hmm. Hmm.
because I'm working with some friends, and it's he says a traditional guitar, bass, and drums sort of
Hmm.
setup,
Hmm.
and we thought I played them Glassblower, and they were like, we could do this, so we did a version of it, and it sounded killer,
Nice.
just with
Nice.
guitar, drums, and bass.
Wow.
And
That sounds
I
amazing.
was singing in the drums,
Yeah.
but it's as nasty as buggery, it really sounds nasty. Um, so I think the song is stand up, I
Hmm.
have I played Sidewinder live
Hmm.
quite a
Hmm.
few times, just using a very, very simple backing tape, and then playing with live musicians over the top of it.
Yeah.
And that's always fun to do,
Hmm.
um, because when you're in Texas and you're talking about vile Americans, it's fun. I
I can agree with you on that one.
mean,
It's funny.
it's not about all Americans.
No, of course
It's
not.
definitely
Absolutely.
not about. And in fact, what I've done over the years is, because when Download played those shows that we did, was it called Beyond Fest? Rings a bell.
I want to
When
say it's called that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was 2010, 2011. We did those shows in North America, and then I think a
Hmm.
couple of years after that, we did a show in Germany and one in two in Russia, and we did Sidewinder live. And I would always add other bits to it, like so. When I was in Canada, I'd say "Vile Canadians,"
Nice.
um, because I can.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm actually very fond of Canada, and I'm very fond of Canadians, but
Mhm.
there's obviously some Canadians I'm not that fond of.
No, it is.
Um,
Yeah, it is a bit of a mixed bag, just not unlike America, really. Yeah.
and I did it when I played in Texas last, and Denver last November, and I also
Mhm.
substituted I actually used the words "vile Republicans" the most, I think,
Nice. That's a
which
good
was
one.
a lot of fun as well.
All right. Well, it's funny when you mentioned Glassblower. I for promoting this show, I shared a clip of the Glassblower video
Yeah, I saw
to
that. Yeah.
promote the show on Facebook, and it was really funny. I believe that the word "breathe" on the video clip got me flagged for anti-COVID propaganda.
Breathe.
Yeah, the word
Really?
"breathe" is on the video, and I guess because you guys are wearing masks and stuff, like climbing into the tank, that Facebook went, no, actually, wearing a mask is actually beneficial towards fighting infection.
Isn't that so bizarre, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
yeah,
wild
so
how like
bizarre.
this is an algorithm that just got picked up by the actual visual
Yeah.
word that on the video got me flagged for that sort of thing. I just found it kind of funny. But it also brings me to this question: what was that video like for you to make with the
I'm so,
with download? Because that like what was the concept of the video? Like, how did this come about? Like,
don't know because I
yeah,
wasn't involved in the concept. It was Bill Morrison who was
yeah,
who directed it, and
that's right.
he had the concept, and it was
Hmm.
obviously totally unrelated to my thematic content, completely
Hmm.
unrelated to the words that I used to form
Hmm.
what I thought the song was about. But that's
Right.
okay. It was just his vision, but um, we were just instructed to come along on a day and do some filming. I think Kevin
Hmm.
and Phil did some filming the night before, the day before, but I couldn't because I was at work.
Hmm.
There's a few little bits where they were like inside and operating controls, which I was not involved with. But
Right.
the video was shot on an empty lot. I think it was on Seymour's Granville, something like
Between
that.
Granville and Seymour, it's a
Yeah,
bit of a mall spot now ish,
yeah.
I
It was
believe.
at the time it was an empty lot,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was a really hot day,
Hmm.
um, and it was probably about I don't know, it was really hot, really really hot,
Hmm.
and he had us wearing these big overcoats, like and it felt like, and it was like a proper movie set. He had the big like spaceship contraption set up,
Mhm.
and everybody was walking by and like, looking at us as though we were like, like it was Hollywood. Um,
Mhm.
and it was just directed, and it was like I can remember at one point we got inside it and we looked out this little window, and Bill said, "Now look, you've got to look as though what you're looking out at is the end of the world." And I'm a crap actor, and I can remember looking out of this window and having this really nice warm smile at my face. And like, Phil's going,
Right.
and Kevin's going, and I'm going. It's like maybe I found the end of the world a bit funny. But and then we ended up then we ended up in the afternoon pulling this thing
Mhm.
through the alleys behind East Hastings, which was fun as
Mhm.
well. I mean, the
Mhm.
local residents probably thought, hey man, what's that? Probably wasn't anything unusual really, but it was in Hastings in the alleys behind Hastings,
Mhm.
and that's all I remember about it. I remember when it was done, we all got copies, and we all going, "Wow, this is like really professional." Bill Morrison's really good at what he does,
Mhm.
and it got on Much Music as well, which I found was hilarious.
Yeah, that's where
um,
I caught it. Yeah.
did you?
Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah,
where I caught it. It was on an alternative block of music
yeah.
videos. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Still one of
that's
the most,
fun.
yeah, and it's still one of the most memorably, like, again, out there videos that I've even seen, and especially in the template of Much Music and the template of just music videos in general. Even like back then, it stood out like a sore thumb. And even today, it still stands out. Like, again, it doesn't feel too dated at all. It's definitely a quite
Yeah,
a.
it's good, and recognize some of the people that are in it as well.
Mhm.
Friends of friends and girlfriends and things like that. And um, yeah, it was a good experience. It felt like we were in a real band, doing a video.
Mhm. Now you said you've toured um, for with Download for the Eyes of Stanley Payne, and you've mentioned a few towns and a couple anecdotes like regarding your lost toys and things like that. But is there any other? Are there any other memorable towns or stories on that tour that you'd like to share with us at all? Anything that
Well,
comes to mind?
one of the best shows. Was the European tour was it was good. It was enjoyable. Um, but I think for me, the North American one is probably more memorable because I think we were playing to bigger audiences, which is which was always very exciting. I can remember
Mhm.
we seemed to kind of like either destroy bits of the PA system or experience. We used to sort of like uh, f- blow the fuses in venues as well. So there was this one show that was in Virginia, and it was in this kind of venue. It was in a shopping mall, close to Washington D.C.
Mhm.
And I can, I think we blew the power twice when we were on stage, and we were all like problem solving with the venue to try to get this fixed. And there was this big sort of like power, thing that this guy
Mhm.
was trying to kind of like connect things to. And he was like saying, "I'm really worried about doing this," and he needed somebody to hold him in case he got a shock. And we were like going, "Well, if you get a shot, we're going to get a shot." But we were all sort of like, we all pulled together and we formed this kind of human chain holding this guy so that he could do the thing. And he eventually fixed it. Philadelphia, I can recall it was a tiny venue, small venue, but we had to walk through the audience to get to the crowd. It was absolutely packed. And we managed to set the sub bass on fire somehow. There was like flames coming out of this sub bass.
Unbelievable.
Um, I tell you what, one of the really good shows musically was
Mhm.
in another strange venue in Eugene, Oregon, and the venue was called the Wonders of the World, the Wow Hall, and it was like an old kind of like, I don't know, like World War II scout hut or something, you know. It was quite big with a beautiful floor, and it was just one of those venues where, you know, everything sort of one of those concerts where everything sounded fantastic. It was just
Hmm.
brilliant. Um, I mean, there was so many. I mean, I remember St. Petersburg in Florida. I think it was there was water. I forgot the name of the venue now. I think it's still going, but it was like an old opera house, well past its best. I played there with the Pink Dots as well a few years later, and there was like water flowing through the ceiling, you know, because there's like holes in the ceiling and things. It was just, um,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it was a strange tour that because it was put together at short notice, with about a month's notice, and we would have like we got down as far as San Francisco, and then we had about 4 or 5 days off in San Francisco.
Hmm.
Um, and we were staying in this hotel, which is a famous hotel, loads of bands stay at, which I forgot the name of. It
Hmm.
was Tropicana or something. Anyway, it had this wonderful little swimming pool, and all of the hotel rooms were around this pool. And there was another band staying in the same pool, and in the same hotel. And everywhere we went, because we were doing like a tourist thing, they'd be there. And it was No Doubt, the band called No Doubt,
Yeah.
and they were
Right.
unheard of at the time. But
Hmm.
literally, I'm not joking. You'd like turn the corner and they'd be there. You know, it was like you'd go in this bar and like they'd be there.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so it was you know, it's quite memorable. There was lots of um, things that happened on it, and many
Hmm.
many adventures, you know, along the way. Um,
Hmm.
Meeting lots of interesting people, and um, you know, sampling the delights of Waffle House in 15 different towns, cities.
Good old Waffle
Um,
House.
yeah, I mean, we actually started the whole thing in Vancouver as well, and that was a funny show because there was um there was some kind of festival on in Vancouver, and we played at the festival, and they were
Hmm.
using all sorts of different venues, and oh, yeah, I forgot the name of the venue now, but it was an
Uh,
old strip club.
oh,
It
could it
was a
have been the
strip club.
Penthouse?
Could have been, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was downtown,
Hmm.
um, but it was an old strip club, and Lydia Lunch was on the bill as well. Um, and then I think the day after, literally the day after, we flew to Europe, and it was a big undertaking. You know, I mean, um, you have no idea how much gear we had. I mean, I think I had 3 or 4 flight cases of gear, me,
Wow.
but Kevin, you know, he took his own PA system with him. Really, he called it a drum monitor. Um, but you know, I've seen PAs in venues that are way smaller. It had its own sub bass unit, and I think it had 3 flight cases, or about 6 foot tall each, and they
Wow.
weighed a ton. They weighed a ton, and obviously all this goes on freight. But we played at this place in Rostock, in East Germany, on an old East German fishing trawler called the Stubnitz, which is very well known. It's now in Hamburg, actually. And since then, I've played on the Stubnitz about 6 or 7 times. It's a great
Hmm.
venue, but it's an East German fishing trawler that's been converted into a floating arts venue. Um, and in order to get the gear in, they had to load all of it into fishing nets and drop it down through the building.
Wow.
You
The
drop it
trained
down through the
in.
structure. So you
Oh
have
my.
these things. We were like going, "Gee, Kevin, I hope they don't drop it." And it was like, you know, massive nets with all these things like swaying back and forward, and it
Wow.
literally goes right through the ship to the bottom of the ship where the venue was. You know, um,
Unbelievable.
I mean, in order to get the gear into the place we rehearsed, which is in the barn of, which is now a studio of Niels van Hoorn in rural Holland. This is where we set up and rehearsed before the tour started. um, they had to get a farmer to bring a forklift truck to put the gear on to lift it up so it could be so it could go through these large windows because the gear was too big to go up the stairs.
Wow.
So we'll get Niels is like, don't worry, I've got a friend. He's got a forklift truck. He'll come tomorrow and do it. And it was like simple, wasn't it? You needed a farmer with a forklift truck to get the stuff into the studio. But it's
Amazing.
it was a big undertaking. I mean,
Mhm.
there was we had a merch guy, we had a tour manager. Well, in Europe we did. We
Mhm.
had we took Anthony who did the sound. And we took Frank Verskuren who did the monitors, and we had a merch guy. So we had 3 crew members as well as the band. Oh,
Mhm.
sorry, we also took a friend of mine, Mark Nugent, who
Mm.
projected the film. So that's 4 crew members.
Right.
Um, and we all flew over there, and it's like it's a different era really because the record companies gave us tour support to do it. So it was
Yeah.
really well put together. It was a great experience. Um, I wouldn't have missed it for the world.
Wow. Well, that's definitely quite the story.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's given us a lot to chew on, that's for sure. And I'd like to really thank you for the time that you've put in here for us. And thank you again for chatting with us before putting on these 2 phenomenal records that we're about to hear tonight, which is The Eyes of Stanley Payne and Sidewinder. Before we go, I'd like to maybe grab you for a station ID, if that's possible.
well, if as long as I can remember it, yeah.
Okay, we are this simply you can say this is Mark Spybey, and you're listening to Scrapyard Radio on KRFF 95.9 FM.
This is Mark Spybey, and you're listening to Scrapyard Radio on. I've forgotten the fucking thing now.
You know what? I'll use that.
I'll write it down.
All right, sounds good. It's at KRFF 95.9 FM.
KRFF 95.9 FM.
Yes, and radiofreefargo.org.
Radio Free Fargo. Is this like not from Fargo, is it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah. No, I'm a touring musician as well, and when we popped in Fargo in 2010, I struck up a kinship with the promoter who ended up getting involved with this station. He ended up giving me a gig. He ended up like recommending me to the station for weekly gigs as of 2021, and I've been
Oh, wow.
more or less doing it ever since. Yeah.
So Scrapyard Radio, KRFF 95.9 FM, radiofreefargo.org.
Yeah,
Okay, here
that
it
would be
goes.
it. Okay.
Okay, this is Mark
All right.
Spybey, and I'm reading this out on Scrapyard Radio, KRFF 95.9 FM, radiofreefargo.org.
Thank you again so much, Mark. This has been an extreme pleasure. I will. You obviously know when to listen to it. I know that it's going to be super late on your time end, but I will definitely send you a copy.
Thanks.
With your permission, I'd like to upload this recording to YouTube as well in full.
Sure, yeah. I mean,
I'll be using chopped up bits for the show. So
yeah, I think I was suitably kind to everybody, as I should be, because everybody was suitably kind to me. So
right, absolutely. Well, again, thank you again so much. And Wes says hi. We share a label.
oh no, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I did not
yeah.
know that. Yeah.
My band Left Spine Down is on Remission as
Oh,
well.
okay, right. Well, I know the name. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've got a sticker on the wall. There you go. You see that? Maybe not.
Where are you? No, I'm looking at a framed photograph now. Point down a little bit. Oh, yeah, there it is. There it is.
It's
Just
currently
above what?
covered up with yeah, but yeah,
Very, very cool. Yeah. Yeah, Wes is a great guy.
he
An
is.
incredibly,
He
yeah,
is. He
an
is.
incredibly smart and gentle businessman to work with.
Oh no, yeah, I met him.
Mhm,
I met him when he came down to see me in Austin, and we,
mhm.
it was really nice to spend some time with him. Yeah, it was. He's a really good guy.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite people out there. Well, I wish you a good evening, Mark. Thank you again so much.
You're very welcome, and take
From
care
the
of
bottom of
yourself.
my heart.
And you're very welcome.
All right.
I'm glad this
Thank you.
worked.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Take
See
care,
you.
sir.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
now.